Well, first of all, I would say never stop learning. And we hear that nursing is lifelong learning, and it is. And we should always be reading. We should always be learning. And the more we learn, the further that we grow. Um, Also, I think a passion. Everybody should have a passion about something. And whether that's being the best critical care nurse or the best NICU nurse, it doesn't matter as long as you have that passion and you really want to make a difference in nursing.
Greetings, and I'd like to read the bio for Nancy Rollins Gantz. And Nancy is a distinguished nurse leader, educator, and author. She has made significant contribution to the field of nursing through her extensive work in mentoring, leadership, and education. Dr. Gantz holds a PhD, DNP, and MBA, and she is actively involved in various nursing organizations, including serving as secretary for Sigma Theta Tau, International Honor Society of Nursing. She has also held numerous national and regional positions with the American Association of Critical Care Nursing and the American Organization of Nurse Executives. Dr. Gantz has a strong passion for mentoring and has published several influential works on the topic. Her notable books include 101 Global Leadership Lessons for Nurses, Shared Legacies from Leaders and Their Mentors, and Mentoring in Nursing Through Narrative Stories Across the World, which provides insight into leadership and impact of mentoring in nursing practice and education. Currently, she is involved in various international and national editorial boards and has presented and consulted in over 45 countries, reflecting her global influence in the nursing field. So welcome to the show, Dr. Gantz. Greetings and welcome to When the Moment Chooses You. I am your host, Coach Charlene, and I am super honored today to have Dr. Nancy Rollins Gantz here with me. Welcome to the show, Nancy.
Thank you. I am honored to be here.
Yes, I am so excited. I think the way that I met you was I saw you on a conference that I was a part of as well. I can't remember the name of the conference, but I saw you and I heard you there and I thought you were pretty amazing.
Oh,
And so
thank you.
Yeah, I'm so happy that you're here because when I start looking at your bio and all of the work that you have done for nursing and mentorship and the two books that you have out, I just was like, okay, here's another trailblazer.
Oh.
And so I'm so excited to get to know you a little bit more. So why don't you tell the listening audience about you a little bit? I did read your bio already, but would love for them to know who you are.
Okay. I think I always wanted to be a nurse. So I went to a 3-year diploma program. And when I got out, I went straight into a trauma cardiovascular ICU unit. And that was back in the day when it was really kind of unheard of. And I had like a 6-week orientation, and that orientation was to the different rhythms that we would be, identifying. But I loved it. I loved ICU and I loved the bedside. And I thought I would be there forever. I thought this is where I'm going to be. I love it. But then I was, of course, working night shift, as we all have to do to pay our dues. I asked one of the staff nurses that I was working with why the manager doesn't come through the unit. And she told me, she said, you don't want to see the manager because if you see her, that means you're in trouble. And I thought to myself, well, it shouldn't be that way at all. So one morning I was getting off duty and I saw the manager come in and she beelined it for me. And I thought, oh no, what have I done? New grad, easy to think that you made a mistake. And she came up to me and she didn't say, welcome to the unit, Nancy, glad to have you with us, or any of that. She said, you do realize that navy blue is not dress code at this hospital, don't you? And
Wow.
And I thought, or she said, navy blue is dress code at this hospital. And I thought, I don't get it, but I had on a pink sweater. Well, here I am, 22. I had a great tan. I could never get tan enough. And it looks so great with my pink sweater. She just, that was all she said. She turned around and left. So I said to myself, that's not leadership. And that was sort of an aha moment for me, where I want to go into leadership. I want to change it. Staff are the most important thing in the hospital, the clinic, no matter where you work. It's the frontline staff that make it or break it. And so that's what I wanted to do. So I worked my way up to charge nurse in the ICU. Then eventually I was the manager of an ICU, another ICU in the city I live in. And then I came back to the ICU where I started to be the director of the ICUs, which was really an interesting time for me, because there were still nurses that worked there when I was there. And one of the problems with this unit was it had about 80% agency staff, because the people that worked there would eat their young, as we say. They wouldn't, obviously they would not let new graduates in. I was very lucky to get in when I did. And they made it very tough for new people. So that was one of my first challenges, was to get rid of the agency and to get staff on board. And I did it through what I call transformational, authentic leadership. And I really believe that a manager needs to be visible. She needs to listen to her staff. And then when they have suggestions, she needs to take them to heart. And if they're possible to change as far as unit structure, as far as process, that should happen. They should be a part of that. They should feel an ownership to that unit in that hospital. So, and I'll never forget one staff meeting that I had with the staff. And this is when I came on board. It was like 2 months that I was on board. And the staff that was left there, that 20%, would never eat in the cafeteria. They only ate in the conference room in the ICU. And it just sort of, to isolate themselves. And I asked them why they did that. And they, at the staff meeting, and they said, well, we're better than the other nurses, than the med-surg nurses. They actually said that.
Oh my God.
And I just sort of shook my head and I said, no, we're not better at all. In fact, when we get a code called, which of course back then the code was called overhead, we had a huge code cart. We go running out the door to the elevator. The med-surg nurse on that unit would get the elevator for us. And I said to them, I said, that nurse that gets the elevator for us when we're running to a code works hard, if not harder, than we do. And I said, you can't ever think that we're better than anybody else, because we're all in this together. We're all in here for the patients. So it was a challenge, needless to say. But when I started in nursing, one of the things I realized is that networking was extremely important. And so I started to build my network. And I also realized mentoring was important. And I started to build that. And the first conference I ever went to, I was a year out of school, and it was AACN's National Teaching Institute. And the most beautiful Black woman was the keynote speaker, Vernice Ferguson. And you're probably too young to remember her, but she just captivated me. I mean, what she said was just phenomenal about leadership and how we should be as leaders. And I don't know what possessed me, but after she spoke, I got up and went up to the podium because I wanted to tell her how great she was. And I said that, she just was so captivating. And I just learned so much from her talk. And she thanked me. And then I don't know how this came out, but I said, would you be my mentor? And she said, yes, she would be. And Vernice was, she has been the past president of the American Academy of Nursing. She has done a lot for nursing. Unfortunately, she's no longer with us. But that was when I first asked her to be my mentor. That was back in the days with no computer. We had to do all writing by hand. We sometimes called each other, but she was my very first mentor, and she was fantastic. I mean, I still look back at how much I learned from her. And how she showed me how critically important it is that we have mentors throughout our career. And then we flip that around and we're mentors to other people. So I continued on. I eventually became a vice president of nursing. And then I started in international consulting, and I was blessed to be asked to open the first freestanding children's cancer hospital in the Middle East for the Islamic world. And that's been the highlight of my career so far. I mean, it was wonderful, a wonderful experience. I was there for 6 years, and started doing a lot of speaking around the globe. And so my networking grew, which is what I wanted. And then I realized that 6 years, my parents were getting older and I wanted to spend time with them. So I decided it was probably time to go back to the United States. So I came back to the United States, got a vice president of nursing position, did a lot of different things. And then I started my own consulting business, and that's CAPS International. And CAPS means Cultural Appreciation through Professional Practice and Synergy, which is a model that I created when I was over in the Middle East, because we had 2,000 nurses from 40 to 60 different countries, and we all had to give the same kind of care, and it was based on Western standards. So I developed this model to where we learn to appreciate the other cultures, even though we give evidence-based practice care to our patients. And so that's really where the word CAPS comes from.
Yeah, that's great. I was going to ask you about that, so I'm so glad that you brought that up. I just wanted to that's a beautiful journey, Nancy, and I wanted to kind of highlight just a little bit of why I started the podcast. In 2020, when we had the murder of George Floyd, something happened within me. I was one of the few Black leaders there, and I just began to start thinking about, oh my God, that could have been like somebody in my family, my uncle, my husband, anything like that. So it took me to kind of a dark place. And so I went into prayer, and then I heard, what you do in this moment will determine your destiny and dictate your future. And so I knew that it was going to be time for me to speak up. I had been in organizations working for a long time, really with things happening to me, but did not have a voice to speak up. I didn't feel safe enough to speak up. And so in 2020, I found my voice, and then I began to start really sharing stories and things like that. So that was like a moment for me. That moment caught me into it. And that's why I named the podcast When the Moment Chooses You. And so as you were talking, I thought about like that moment with that mentor that you connected with that really changed the trajectory of your life in a sense. And so these moments that we have are so powerful. And I'd love to hear more, because you have been in the industry for so long. I'd love to hear how did you shift from, starting your own consulting company? That takes a lot of courage, first of all, because I'm actually in process right now. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how do people do this? So can you tell us a little bit more just about that transition of like really doing something like you really want to do, like the consulting company?
You bet.
Okay.
It was sort of an easy transition for me because as I said earlier, I was building my network. And that was extremely important to me. And I always focused on that. When I met people at conferences, I made sure I got their name. Well, back then we'd get their card, and I'd send them a handwritten card. It was great meeting you, or an email, great meeting you, to keep that, connection between us. which is why, for one reason, the 2 books on mentoring that I've written, we have so many authors. It's because they're people that I know and could share their story on mentoring. But you know, it's interesting how we have aha moments at different times, and we know at times when to do things. And I think that's when I came back to the United States from the Middle East. That's when I knew it was time for me to branch out. Even though I had a full-time job, I really wanted to do my own consulting. And I wrote emails to the people that I knew, telling them what I could offer. I was very much into cultural diversity and leadership, mentoring, that kind of thing. And people would reach out to me, and I would go and do workshops. I'd go and speak, and it just sort of blossomed.
Yeah, that's really awesome. Now, you talked about your book. So let's kind of talk about that a little bit, because that's pretty amazing that you wrote 2 books. Can you share with us about the 2 books? And I'll make sure that I put the links so that people can purchase them as well. So tell us a little bit about them.
You bet. The first book was published by Sigma, Theta Tau International.
Okay.
And I had over 200 authors. And it was my first attempt at something like that. And it was a huge project, but we got it done on time, which surprised me. But the stories are so, they're phenomenal. Stories from South Africa, from Asia, from the Netherlands, from all over the world, and things that they did to mentor staff or mentor each other. And then I decided, that was 10 years ago that I wrote that book. And then I decided I want to do another one. And this time I was smarter, and I realized I think I need a co-author to help me because it was such an enormous project. And plus I knew that I wanted more authors than last time. So we had close to 400 authors in this book. The book is over 1,000 pages. It's quite a heavy book, I must say, but it also was a phenomenal experience. And as I said, the people that we used were people that I had met. Some of them I had met 20, 30 years ago that I still kept in contact with, which I think is so important in nursing. We are a global profession. And, you know, no one country is really, in my eyes, the leader. We all are leaders, and we need to come together, and we need to work together, like ICN does. And I think that's so important. So, but the second book was just published last year. So, and you can get them on Amazon. If you just type my name in, they'll come up.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so why the passion with mentoring? I know you said because of Bernice that you met, but like what is it about mentoring that you really, really want to drive home to us for today?
What you can learn from other people. And I look back at the mentors I've had in my career, and when I took one position, I knew that finance would be my big challenge. And I was not really up on finance. I had a bachelor's degree, but that was it. And so I asked the man that I reported to if he would mentor me in finance. So I would come, you know, so I would get intelligent about running the budget, about crunching the numbers and that kind of thing. And he did. And I've done that where my deficits are. Like I just switched into education, nursing education, after 30 some years in nursing administration. And I didn't know a thing about education. So I knew I needed a mentor. In fact, I have 2 mentors in education. Yeah. And they've been just invaluable for me because of what I've learned. And I've shared with them, you know, what's happening as far as for me clinically. and they would share different ideas, what I could do. And that's the beauty about mentoring. It's not, the mentor doesn't tell the mentee, this is what you have to do. The mentor gives the mentee ideas on what they can do from their experience. So then the mentee decides what would best fit their situation, what they could easily do to reach the goal that they have. And I think that's very important. It's not something where the mentor drives home, you do it this way or you don't do it at all. It's more of working with them and suggesting different ways to do things just through the experience that you've had. And I think one of the important things is the mentees that I've had, they've gone on to mentor other people. And that's what it's all about. You know,
Yes.
once you have a mentor, to go out and you know, pay it forward, you know, do the same thing for someone else. And especially with the young nurses that we have that are coming out of school, they need that mentoring, because I know firsthand they don't get the clinical experience in nursing school.
Yeah. Well, and you spoke to something that was really important, and you experienced it yourself, and we still are hearing today about nurses eating their young. And so, what would you say to the nursing world out there about new nurses that are coming in to help us with taking care of patients? Like, what type of encouragement can you give those particular new nurses in particular, as far as finding a mentor? Like, how can they do that?
I tell new nurses and I tell students that I have in class that they need to identify someone that they're working with. And it doesn't have to be their preceptor. It can be someone else on the unit who they want to emulate, who has skills that they want to develop. And whether that's leadership, education, clinical skills, whatever. And then tap into that person and ask them if they'll be your mentor. And have your goals in mind before you ask them, because I would think anybody who was asked that question would say, well, what can I do for you? You know, what
Right.
you want me to do? And I tell new graduates that a mentor is not going to come to them and say, oh, I'll mentor you. You're going to have to go and ask them. The mentee usually is the one who initiates the mentor-mentee relationship. So it's very important that they do that, because many of the new graduates are frightened about going out into the work world because of the lack of experience. But they shouldn't be. They should know that there are nurses out there that want to take them along by their side and mentor them and help them get through the first couple of years process so they feel good and they don't leave or get burnt out.
Yeah, that's really great. Well, Nancy, how do you think mentoring influences the development of nurse leaders? Because it sounds like you've been in leadership quite a bit. What about our nurse leaders and their mentorship? Do you think that's valuable?
Definitely. I don't think there is a nurse leader that should not have a mentor, or several of them.
So automatically,
Exactly.
Do you think that should be part of the process of onboarding?
Exactly. I think that's a great idea. And even before the process of onboarding, if you know you want to go into a leadership position, find someone who's already in a leadership position or who's thought of as a leader on the unit, sort of a quiet leader, and work with them. Develop the skills they have, because then your skills will shine through. But everybody should have a mentor. I just strongly believe that, and especially in leadership and education, very important.
Yeah, I think that's so critical. I remember, so I was kind of one of those people, Nancy, that my specialty was NICU. And so I loved just being in the space and doing deliveries and resuscitating and all of the adrenaline stuff. But then my director at the time, she starts saying, Charlene, I see leadership in you. And I was like, no, I'm good. I'm good. I'm going to keep on doing what I'm doing. So, and then one of the other managers, they started kind of getting after me, and I was like, why are these people bothering me? And so I think sometimes people are just like just doing their grind, but then something deeper within me start calling me to say it's time for you to step up into leadership. And so I did. I heeded to the call, and then the mentor that I had at the time, the director, she retired like a year after. So I was like so bummed because then after that, it was, I mean, I still stay connected with her. So I'm going to say she's kind of like my lifelong mentor, but I wasn't as able to connect with her as much as I would have liked to. So I think you are so on spot there because it would be nice. And then I think of nurse leadership. There's so much turnover a lot of times. Like I've experienced a lot of turnover, especially in the
That's right.
director area. So then you kind of get lost in the sauce a little bit. And so for those nurse leaders out there, what would you encourage them to do? How could they actually find a mentor?
Just have them identify something with someone within the leadership team um, that they feel is respected by everybody and has good leadership skills. And the reason they would know good leadership skills is because they should be reading. I couldn't read enough when I knew that I wanted to go into leadership. I read every leadership book I could. Um, that's another thing that's extremely important. That and being involved with organizations like AONL, which is specifically for leaders, which I believe all nurses are anyway. But
Yeah.
you need to involve yourself in those kind of activities so you really understand not only what leadership's about, but the areas that you need to maybe bone up on. Like maybe you aren't the best listener in the world. I remember when I had my first VP job, I was fairly young, and I was talking to my younger brother, and I was looking away. I wasn't even looking at him. And he stopped and he said, "Are you listening to me?" And I looked at him and I said, "Of course I am." And he said, "No, you're not. You're looking over somewhere else. You're not even hearing what I'm saying." And you know, Charlene, that has stuck with me forever, forever.
Yeah.
And that is just so important. Listening skills for leaders is critical, just critical, among other things. But
Right.
listening especially, and especially to staff.
Yeah, and you know what, I love what you said about that earlier when you talked about managers need to listen to the staff. We just went on the journey before I retired. We had just completed our journey with getting Magnet with Distinction, and that's what I witnessed like amazingly is how like my CNE, for instance, she was so in tune with listening to the staff as we converted our whole system into this Magnet model. It was so beautiful to see and how empowering it was for the nurses. I mean, we went from after 2020, the best way that I could describe it, Nancy, is like wilted flowers, and they became these beautiful
Oh,
bouquet
I
of
love it.
different color flowers. It was, and the passion was palpable, you know, like this year, last year, as we were going on that journey. So I think that's so critical because I have seen in my experience leaders not listening and leaders being similar to the one that you described when you were first on the unit. So I think that's so critical. So what would you say then, Nancy, to someone, there's a nurse or a healthcare worker out there that may be stuck? They may still be stuck in some of the trauma from our pandemic
Mhm.
that we experience. What type of advice or words of wisdom that you can give them?
I would tell them just to reach out, to be energetic about finding a mentor, to empower yourself, enable yourself, engage with others. Very important, because if you sit back, it's not going to happen the other way. You've got to reach out. And when you reach out, great things happen. I mean, so many great things. I would never believe that I've had the career that I have, and I've just been so blessed. And it wouldn't have happened if I would have just sat back and been an ICU nurse all my life. You have to have that passion, and you need to think about, what are your goals in life? What do you want to accomplish? What is the legacy that you want to leave someday? And that's what'll direct you towards the right mentor. I really believe that. I really totally believe that.
Well, I think that is absolutely beautiful because most people, I'm going to say me, even when I started this podcast, there's power in making the ask. But I was so timid for so long saying, "Oh my gosh, they'll never say no." You know, I'm like talking myself out of it before I even before I even like start the podcast. And then I mean, I asked someone that I totally would never have asked, and they said yes. And I was like, "Oh my gosh, they said yes." But it was almost like this self-limiting beliefs that I had to fight through to actually just simply ask.
That's right.
Because why don't we ask? It's because I was fearful that the person would say no. And guess what? I have to just keep going. If they say no, go to someone else. But at that time, it was such a big thing for me that I needed to get clarity and breakthrough in the area, which I did. So I think that's so important to actually make the ask, because I think if I would have heard you say that, Nancy, 20 years ago, I would have been more intentional about making the ask about, hey, could you mentor me? I want to be able to grow and etc. So thank you for sharing that. That's really awesome.
You have
I have a
you have to be a risk taker. If you want to move
yes,
forward,
that's
you
good.
have to be a risk taker, and you're going to get no's. I mean, I've had no's, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's okay. You just move forward, and like you said, and like you did, you find someone else, and that's all
Yeah.
right.
Yeah. Well, you know what? I want to talk a little bit about the future of nursing. And I'd love to hear from you, your thoughts on where you see mentorship for our future.
Well, I feel very firmly that mentorship could really make a difference in nursing, in the profession, and bottom line, healthcare. If we all mentored someone just coming out of school, or a fairly new graduate, just think of the impact that we could have if we mentored them towards best practice,
Yeah.
how to be professional, working with patients. It's just energizing when I think about the impact that we could have, because healthcare is so messed up right now. But
Right.
nursing can have a big impact, but we have to take that step. And I find it sad that a lot of hospitals don't have formal mentoring programs, even though more and more are starting them. I think it should be required. I think it should be mandatory. And every CNO or chief nurse should embrace mentoring. They should realize the value and how we can really grow as a profession when we share our expertise with the younger generation, so they don't get burned out, so they don't get discouraged and leave, which they're already finding is happening. And that
Yeah.
just saddens me so much that happens, which is probably one reason that I make a point of speaking to my senior students about finding a mentor, how important it is. Some of them don't even know what that word means. So we talk
Yeah.
about it. We talk about the benefits, because I want them to leave my class knowing about mentorship, and I want them to look for a mentor when they get out of school.
Yeah, that is so amazing. That is, you are a phenomenal human being.
Oh,
So thank
thank
you so
you.
much for the work that you're doing. I always love to ask my guests about three wisdom gems that they would love to share with the audience. It can be inspirational, whatever is like on your heart right now to encourage someone else. Let's hear Nancy's top three.
Well, first of all, I would say never stop learning. And we hear that nursing is lifelong learning, and it is. And we should always be reading. We should always be learning. And the more we learn, the further that we grow. Also, I think a passion. Everybody should have a passion about something. And whether that's being the best critical care nurse or the best NICU nurse, it doesn't matter as long as you have that passion and you really want to make a difference in nursing. And probably lastly, I would say be active in organizations. Be active, because that's the way we can pull together. If you isolate yourself, don't get involved with other people, we're not going to come together as a profession. And I think probably those are three things that have really served me well, that I would encourage all new nurses.
Okay, that sounds wonderful. I love those three wisdom gems. And then I'd love to just open the floor for you if you want to talk a little bit more about your books. That's totally fine. Also, how people can get in touch with you if they would like to, because you indeed are an amazing mentor. I don't know if you still mentor others, but you are amazing.
Well, thank you. They can email me. And I'm on Facebook, I'm on LinkedIn, and my email is all one word, nancyRollinsGantz@gmail.com. But I have no problem with people emailing me. I get a lot of emails, and I look forward to them.
Well, that is wonderful. Well, it has been a total joy to have you on the program, and I'm so excited that I got a chance to get you on here finally. And I know it's going to impact others because I got some like serious insight, like you talked about the networking part. And like about a year ago, I started networking a little bit more. I knew that was important that I'm going to have to do. And so I'm so excited about the possibilities because I retired July 5th, Dr. Gantz. And so it's time for a new journey for me. I'm not like retired because I got too much in me.
I don't think anybody should ever retire.
No, there's so much to do, and there's so many people to still impact that I will still continue to do that. But I do want to do consulting. So you really blessed me with the information that you shared about consulting. Just that, just your experience with it is just really encouraging and inspiring. So thank you so much for that.
Well, and thank you, Charlene. It's been wonderful talking with you.
I want to thank you for tuning in to another inspiring episode of When the Moment Chooses You. I'm your host, Coach Charlene, and it's been an absolute pleasure. Each journey we've shared today is a reminder that when the moment chooses you, the possibilities are endless.